Hey guys, it's Tombox. Welcome to MST.TV. This is a ruling segment for you guys, and this is actually a very important one because we got some updates from the Remote Duel Invitational, as well as some of the more commonly caught procedural errors that you guys should pay attention to, as well as some of the plays that you can perhaps execute to dodge and squeeze out of really tight situations. And that's why make sure you guys hit that thumbs up button, hit subscribe, ding notification bell to stay up to date with MST.TV so that you guys can get more updates like this one. Now, we're going to be talking about some big cards here, some stuff that were caught off course on this stream. We've got AdamAdorn Arcosaur, that's one for Sam there. We have an update on trap monsters. We have an update on the interaction of forbidden droplets and some common misplays from the Triple Tactics talent. These are some of the big ones that have been caught, and I want to make sure you guys pay attention to these because you don't want to lose at the top tier level, especially for those of you guys who are playing online and you're just climbing the ladder. You want to make sure that everything's played correctly. Well, these are some of the things that are most commonly missed and have the most significant impact. So make sure you guys stay tuned for this. All right, guys, make sure you guys hit that thumbs up and hit subscribe, ding notification bell if you guys want more updates like this one. Special thanks to you new Patreons out there. We have Code Red, we have Jonas, and we also have Isaiah. Thank you for joining up on the Patreon. Welcome to the Patreon family, and let's get started. Starting off with AdamAdorn Arcosaur. This has been made popular thanks to Team Samurai X1 because of whatever he did on stream. He used an Arcosaur, pop an Arcosaur. That is not possible because the card text states, if this card is normal or special summon, you can destroy one dinosaur monster in your hand or face-up field, except AdamAdorn Arcosaur. That's right, it cannot pop something with the same name as itself. This is important because it happened on stream. Team Samurai X1's final round versus Cody, and it was something that he comboed off and kept going off for a very long time until it was finally caught. It was properly reverted after the fact, so the finals was fixed up with a repaired game state. So that was that. For some of you guys that tuned in later, wasn't sure if it was actually proper, you can check the graveyards. The AdamAdorn Arcosaur, there's no longer two on in the graveyard, there was only one. So that part made it a bit more proper, and then they just proceeded. Of course, if you do that in real life, you will be penalized with a procedural error minor, and that's a warning. But if you go way too far, then you have a problem. Then you might go into an irreparable game state or an accepted game state. It really depends on the situation there, because most of it's repairable, but it really depends on how far you go and what actually led up to it. You'll have to wait for the investigation to actually clear that up. But that was an important one because it happened during the finals, and since a lot more people are playing dinosaurs, might as well just put that one out there because someone's going to make that exact same mistake. Anyways, that was an easy one. Let's move on to some of the ones that are a bit more important. We're going to go into the forbidden droplets ruling. So the question was, what happens when you use forbidden droplets on a monster that has an attack boosting effect? And we're going to give you guys that clarity right now. So say, for example, what happens when you use forbidden droplets on a Grenmaju de Iza or a Borreload Savage Dragon that has something equipped? What happens to its actual attack stat? So how it would resolve is as follows. So say you have a Grenmaju de Iza, it is at, I guess, 15,000 attack points. It would be halved and then negated. The halving would actually freeze the current attack stat, and due to the application of the forbidden droplets, it would be frozen at 7,500, and the effects are considered as negated, which is very interesting right here, guys. It's not like you can imperm the card. Instead, it's halved, stuck at a certain point, and then the effects are negated, which is very important because of the way it's worded. So that, yeah, technically it's negated, but it still has the attack stat frozen, and until the forbidden droplet wears off, it will be frozen at that stat, but the monster is still technically considered as, well, negated. And as for Borreload Savage Dragon, it has something equipped to it that actually helps it gain the attack. What happens there? Well, in that particular case, there's two scenarios. What if you actually added the Buster Lock on top? So say we're going to use easy numbers here. So you equip a monster with 2,000, so Borreload Savage gained 1,000 attack from that because it gains half of it, and then you use droplets on it. Droplets would make the Borreload Savage basically lose the equip. However, during the resolution, it would have it first and then it would lose it. So it would be from 4,000 to 2,000. And then when it would regain its stats, say the droplets wear off, since the equip also got detached, it no longer has the attack boost, so it boosts back to 3,000. Now, in the case that you actually had double equip, say you equip with a Union Carry as well, the one with Union Carry doesn't really detach, but it also boosts 1,000. So the Borreload Savage right now is, say, at 5,000, and if you get hit by droplets, only the Link monster would fall off, so you lose the 1,000 for later on, but since it halves first, so from the 5,000, you will go from half to 2,500 while the Buster Lock is still in place. And then when it finishes, I say the droplets wear off, then it will go back up to 4,000 because the Buster Lock stuff is still there, and that's now reapplying. The freeze of the attack stat is no longer there. So hopefully there's not going to be any more arguments regarding that. Now, there's actually a couple other things regarding Forbidden Droplets I want you guys to be aware of, and we're going to go into the card text first. Send any number of other cards from your hand and or field to the graveyard and choose that many monsters your opponent controls, and until the end of this turn have their attack and also their effects are negated. And in response to this card's activation, your opponent cannot activate cards or the effects of cards with the same original type monster spells traps as the cards sent to the graveyard to activate this card. You can only activate one Forbidden Droplets per turn. Here's a very important thing to note, is that Forbidden Droplets has to hit the exact amount sent. If there isn't enough monsters on the field, say you remove one of your monsters on the field, say you tribute it, say with an Icarus attack or something like that, you pay something for a cost for a different card that you're allowed to respond with. Or maybe you're able to kind of change up the number. As long as you are under that number or your opponent cannot select that number of monster on the field, it actually negates nothing. It has to be exact. So if you go from, they send 2 cards to negate 2 cards, or at least to aim to negate 2 cards, and say you have a Pankratops, you are able to tribute one off because they sent like a spell or something. So they sent 2 cards, but there's only 1 monster left. Forbidden Droplets hits nothing. Nothing gets halved, nothing gets negated. That's why this card is very interesting. You can use that to your advantage. Okay, some key interactions for Forbidden Droplets in the current format that you have to be aware of and make sure you catch is that if you have a Herald of the Arclight on the field, and Herald of the Arclight could be from like Infernobles, from the Rock deck, if that's on the field, Forbidden Droplets has to send a monster on the field to the graveyard, otherwise they cannot send monsters at all, because remember, sending the cards to the graveyard is the cost of Forbidden Droplets. If you don't do that, you can't really use that part. With Herald of the Arclight on the field, you can't send the monster from hand because they would get banished. In that case, you can't use that to pay cost. And if they activate Forbidden Droplets, if they send a spell, Herald of the Arclight is basically 100% going to negate that Droplets and basically waste your opponent's cost. And perhaps even change the number of cards on the field to really mess with your opponent. And maybe the whole Droplets does just not work in the end anyway. So that's actually a very big interaction. Just keep that in mind. Note that you can actually play that around that, because you can just summon the monster and then send the monster from the field to the graveyard to actually stun your opponent out that way, so that you can still use monsters, but it does require you to commit a summon to actually get there. So if it's a free summon that is a special summon, then that's fine too. That means you can play around it properly. And also note that if you say you play a Pot of Extravagance as your first action, you can still chain Droplets to it, send the card that you already used to the graveyard to benefit off of that, so you can minimize the cost of Droplets while maximizing the amount of cards that you receive back. And these are some of the higher level interactions that you have to be aware of for Forbidden Droplets, because it's not that simple of a card, and it is super powerful. And at the highest tier play, these are some of the stuff that people will use to capitalize on the card and minimize the cost. The next big card that we want to talk about is Triple Tactics Talent. This is a common misplay that people did because they didn't read the card. So we're going to start off with the card text. If your opponent has activated a monster effect during your main phase this turn, activate one of these effects. Draw 2 cards, take control of one monster your opponent controls until the end phase. This effect, unlike Change Apart, does not target, okay? It does not target the monster. Or look at your opponent's hand, choose one, and shuffle it back into the deck. That's really cool, and you can only activate 1 Triple Tactics Talents per turn. Note the card that it does say activate, so if you use, say, a card like Solemn Judgment, for instance, they will be able to activate a second copy, and well, that's going to be a heavy minus on your end. Now, the key thing to know I want to point out is something that people kind of bypass. A lot of people just read the first part of the condition and that was all they go into. If your opponent activates a monster effect, you know, you can activate one of these effects. However, the other part is also very important, which is the timing. During your main phase this turn. And since it says during your main phase, stuff that activates during the battle phase do not count. So if you do some battle destruction triggers, that will not apply to Triple Tactics talent. If you bait someone's gamma during the battle phase, that does not count. There's a lot of things that they can do that does not count, especially if you're using a Pankratops and they're like, oh, I'm gonna gamma that effect. That's how people kind of dodge around Triple Tactics talents, by starting to activate most of their quick effects during the battle phase to dodge this particular card. Otherwise, well, in terms of cool plays that Cody kind of pulled off, is that your opponent, he basically baits out the opponent's gamma. He's playing the rock deck, and after the baits out the gamma, the tuner died. What he does is he plays Triple Tactics talent, take control of your opponent's gamma, which is the tuner, and then he uses that to make Crystal Hack Leaf Ibrax. And with the card on the field, you now can't even get impermed. Imperm's turned off. The only thing that's really left is like Ashes and Veilers, and that's probably not going to be enough to really stop anything. So that's actually one really great way to actually use Triple Tactics talents to your advantage to proceed to do your Crystal Hack Leaf Ibrax combo. Use that to your advantage, guys, because that's a pretty neat one, and it's really cool because it doesn't really target whatever you take. So okay, now for the update for trap monsters. Trap monsters, during the Remote Duel Invitational, it was ruled that the back row, the monsters no longer uses up the spell and trap zone. Once they've moved out, and they are still considered as a trap card, but they won't eat up that zone. Like previously, of course, all the trap monsters, whenever they're special summoned out, that zone is actually considered unusable because that trap is still applied there. But in this case now, that card is no longer there, and if it does get, say, Book of Moon, so if you flip a trap monster face down, it's supposed to go back to the spell and trap zone. However, if all your zones are filled up, then instead of going to the spell and trap zone, for instance, it will go into the graveyard because it has no space to go anymore. But in the case of a monster that is a trap card that is no longer considered as a trap card, say like a Paleozoic, if you flip that one face down, it will just flip face down just like any other monster, because the applied effect happened in the graveyard and it's basically still applying unless you can find some way to actually turn it off, which is very unlikely because it's still considered as a monster card, and all the monster card basic ruling are still applying to that particular card. So that's how that one's going to work out. And some things to keep in mind now that we're talking about trap monsters is infinite impermanence. A common thing that people forget is that that card is still considered as a trap card. And since it is still considered as a trap card, if you use infinite impermanence in the same column as, say, a Golden Land Conquistador, that card will actually go back to the back row. So as a Eldritch player, you have to be very careful whenever you move your monster into those zones, because if you move it into a zone with the same column, it is still susceptible to infinite impermanence. And if they imperm, say, your Golden Lord, your card is actually going to go to the back row and stay face up, and basically it's going to be stuck there for a while until you can find, say, use a Droplets to send it into the graveyard, or use some other method, say a Magician's Soul, to send it to the graveyard to draw some cards. But that's kind of the situation that you have to learn to manipulate your zones for your Eldritch cards. And another thing to note is that if your monster is in the same column as the imperm one, and they activate imperm and you chain your card moves out of the way so that it is no longer a trap card in the same column as the imperm. So basically you got your summon out and kind of just dodge the imperm. That is also possible. Just be aware of your chain links. If you revert the chain link, however, say you activate your Conquistador and they chained an imperm on one of your monster, your card is basically still stuck there because it couldn't even move. So basically it was already negated. It just stays face up and kind of just stuck in your back row. So, you know, the chain links do matter, and just keep that in mind. Because some people actually forget when it became a monster, they forget to actually move it back to the back row because it just completely bypassed. Remember, imperm affects both players. Infinite impermanence affects my own column as much as your column. So it's just all spells and traps in the same column. They are basically negated. Next, we have one of the biggest trap cards in the entire format, which is Dogmatic, a Punishment. You're probably going to see this card a lot. Now, I'm going to go into the card text first. So Dogmatic Punishment, target one face-up monster your opponent controls, send one monster with an equal or higher attack from your extra deck to the graveyard, and if you do, destroy that monster. Until the end of your next turn, after this card resolves, you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck. You can only activate one Dogmatic Punishment per turn. Something to know about this card is that Dogmatic Punishment doesn't send the card for cost, it sends as a part of the effect. So if you somehow stop the effect, that's fine too. Now, key thing here is that if you remove the monster that Dogmatic Punishment targeted, it no longer sends anything. So if the monster is removed, you can't send anything. If the thing is missing, doesn't mean you send an entity. Some people try to send things as quote-unquote cost. That's an illegal. That's an easy procedural error that you can easily dodge. And I wanted to talk about the interaction with this card versus Mystic Mind, because a lot of people get a little trigger happy, especially when they're like, oh man, I'll use punishment to out the Mystic Mind, which is a common mentality. But note that punishment needs to target a monster, and here's the common issue interaction. All right, guys, so you use the punishment to target your opponent's monster, and you pop their monster and you send the Entis. Problem is, Entis activates in a new chain. By popping the monster, you may have reduced the number of monsters on the field to the point where your opponent now has less. Mystic Mind is active, Entis does not activate, and you don't pop the Mystic Mind. That's why Dogmatic players do struggle, and this is something that I've talked with Ryan Yu about. I've talked with actually quite a few other players about, and I've experienced it firsthand, where I put up a Mystic Mind and my card gets popped by a punishment because it was pretty weak. Entis gets thrown into the graveyard, but then he's like, activate the Entis. I'm like, you can't activate it. Mystic Mind's still alive. And they're like, oh yeah, that interaction does not really work out. So, I'm just playing out the interaction for you guys. So just key things to note here. If the monster goes missing, you don't send a card because it doesn't send for cost. And if you have an interaction with Mystic Mind, just keep in mind that Entis activates in a new chain. So it's not likely going to work in your favor in that particular case. And finally, I guess the last card I want to talk about is this little rock monster called Doki. Remember, if you have Weeping Idol can't really be sent to the graveyard unless you're running like another copy of Weeping Idol. That's probably the only way you can summon it, because Doki needs to summon out a monster with a matching attribute as well. So you can't get out your tuners like that. That's something that I personally made a mistake on. Like, oh yeah, use it to summon out the Doki and summon out, like, say, a Seeker. And they're like, no, you can't do that. And that's something to keep in mind, guys. And that's all the major rulings that kind of occurred during the Remote Duel Invitational that I think I personally noticed during the stream and stuff like that. So yeah, that's really cool and all, but that's all I got for this particular segment, guys. Hopefully you guys learned a thing or two, and I know some of this stuff will be applicable for future formats as well, especially with the droplet stuff, especially the tactics talent stuff. These are stuff that you'll eventually get the card, because I guess it's kind of pricey right now for you guys to get the card. But once you get the card, I want you guys to play it fairly, play it properly, and use it to your maximum advantage according to the rules. That's all I got for this video, guys. If you guys enjoyed this video, smash that thumbs up button, hit subscribe, ding notification bell if you want to stay up to date with more ruling videos like this one, or perhaps updated deck profiles. I'm getting married on, oh my god, there's a fly in here. I'm getting married in a couple days, so I'm going to be away from videos just for a little bit, guys. And I'm also kicking off a new channel. Don't forget, there's a giveaway that should still be happening in this video. Just check it down in the description below, and you can win this beautiful Remote Duel playmat. This beautiful playmat. Alright, guys? It's really cool. This is very exclusive, and I'll see you guys in the next one.